On last week's podcast, I presented the Autism Navigator, which is a new web-based tool to help parents and professionals identify autism earlier and earlier. But does that early diagnosis mean it's a real diagnosis? How stable is an early diagnosis? And if someone is not diagnosed early, does it mean that they will never be diagnosed? Of course, all these questions have real implications for clinical practice. A new study by the High Risk Baby Siblings Research Consortium, a group of researchers who can study autism even prior to a diagnosis, really examined this question using a valuable database of information. The project was led by Sally Ozenoff at UC Davis. So what is stability? Stability is defined as how many children with an initial diagnosis retain it over time. Researchers have known for a long time that in children diagnosed with autism after age 3, autism is very stable. Previous research studies looking at the stability of autism were done in samples from clinics. This might have been slightly biased because in terms of symptoms that are evident by 12 to 18 months, these kids had them and they were enough to arouse concerns in parents. So those kids were likely to have a stable diagnosis. One that was made early, was consistent. So the present study's design took advantage of a very large sample, a very special sample, a group of later born siblings of children with autism. This means they were unselected for clinical concerns because they were enrolled before the age when parents typically begin to worry about autism. They were enrolled before 18 months of age. So this study didn't have the same problems of potentially being biased. So when the data was pooled across 7 of these sites, which are 418 high-risk siblings, they found that the stability of an autism diagnosis at 18 months was 93%. There were relatively few children diagnosed with autism at 18 or 24 months whose diagnosis was not confirmed at 3 years. There were, however, many children with autism at 36 months or 3 years who had not been diagnosed at 18 months. So what does this mean? First of all, it means that an early diagnosis of autism is very stable. In terms of clinical practice, this means if a child is diagnosed, you need to intervene. There's no need to wait and confirm a diagnosis. The symptoms are not going to change without intervention. Second, reevaluating all these children with diagnoses at 18 months is unnecessary and it will clutter clinics and increase waiting times for other children. The other finding was that many children who were ultimately diagnosed at age 3 had not yet been diagnosed at 18 or 24 months. This means that symptoms emerge and unfold. Not all children show a clear symptom picture at 18 and 24 months. It also means to screen early and screen often. Certain groups of children may need to be rescreened after age 2, particularly those who showed earlier delays and those with an older sibling on the spectrum. And it also means that researchers need to develop more sensitive methods of detection at early ages. Finally, diagnosis can be made as young as 18 months. Even if clinicians don't catch everyone this early, those that are caught, they're right about. That's pretty impressive. It means that clinicians have tools and strategies to make accurate early diagnoses and should be attempting to identify them by 18 months of age. Another group of researchers who participate in this consortium are studying the biological features of children who receive an autism diagnosis, but they're studying it even before they actually get the diagnosis, as early as 12 months and as late as 24 months. This collaboration is called IBIS, or Infant Brain Imaging Study. In fact, they're still recruiting for this study, and they're looking for younger siblings of individuals who've had an autism diagnosis. You can live anywhere in the U.S., and you even get free evaluations, and in some cases be expedited into early intervention services. If you think you're eligible, go to www.ibisnetwork.org or post a note to us somewhere. We'll get you to the right site. And I'll even put this link in the comment section for you to find. So if we know some of the early biological markers of autism, early diagnosis will become more and more of a reality. We know that some of the behavioral features are hard to find until 12 to 18 months of age, but we also know that biological signs can be seen prenatally. So the earlier we can detect, the earlier those kids can receive early intervention. My daughter is actually a walking, talking early intervention success story, and all kids should have the same opportunities. So Jason Wolf, who's a part of this study, has been tracking infants whose older sibling has autism. He's been tracking them from 6 months to 3 years of age and looking at their brain structure through high-tech imaging techniques. By collaborating across these 4 sites, the research study can really start to build the sample sizes needed to justify the findings. So far, most of the studies looking at this structure have been in adolescents and adults and have found a smaller corpus callosum in individuals with autism. So the main question of this study was, what happens in infants with autism before they are even diagnosed? Somewhat surprisingly, they found the reverse of what has been seen later in life. In infants who developed autism, the corpus callosum was significantly larger. This was also evident when they controlled for total brain size, which is also known to be elevated in autism early in life. In addition to these really interesting findings, this study, again, produces more evidence that you can't just take an individual with autism and study them and expect that those changes in their brains or in their behavior are going to be the same across their lifespan. I've asked Dr. Wolf to write a blog for our website that explains the study in a little bit more detail, and it will be up on Monday. Thanks for listening. If you have a child with autism and are expecting or have an infant, consider participating in this study. It doesn't matter where you live, they're recruiting nationwide. Also, next week is the International Meeting for Autism Research. Well, there will be no podcast. We will be reporting back after the meeting, and we'll also be feeding out reports during the meeting from the Simons Foundation Autism Research Initiative. They do a great job anyway, so why reinvent the wheel? Talk to you all soon.